The following podcast may not be for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
In the darkest depths of winter, when nights stretched endless and hungry, some cultures didn't celebrate. They survived. In this episode, we're peeling back the cheerful veneer of Christmas to reveal something far older and darker. Before twinkling lights and shopping malls, before Santa wore his red suit in TV commercials, there was Yule, a 12-day feast born in the blood-soaked snow of the Norse kingdoms. While we hang stockings by our fireplaces, the Vikings hang offerings from sacred trees. While we leave cookies for Santa, they left offerings for Odin, the one-eyed wanderer who led the wild hunt through the black skies. Our modern Christmas, with its carefully wrapped presents and sugar-coated carols, is a thin frost over ancient ice. In this episode, we will discover why the Vikings trembled at the sound of hooves on their roof, why they feared what lurked in the longest night of the year, and how their rituals to survive winter's wrath became the traditions we know today. Pour yourself something warm, dear listeners. Draw close to your fires. And remember, sometimes the best stories are the ones we've forgotten. Winter lurks like a patient predator in the deepest shadows of the year. First the cold creeps in, and then the weeks of bitter winds and frost-bitten mornings pass before winter is declared. It is genuinely declared winter when the Earth's poles reach their furthest tilt from the sun's warm embrace. We call this the winter solstice. It's the longest night when darkness reigns supreme and sunlight becomes a fleeting memory as we experience the shortest day. On this day, shadows stretch their ghostly fingers across the land, and the night wraps its cold arms around us. In our northern hemisphere, this dark day falls on December 21st or 22nd, when the world holds its breath in the grip of midwinter. But we are digging deeper into humanity's oldest stories. Back to the frost-covered lands of the Norse, you'll find they called it something else. Yule. A name whispered around dying fires when the night seemed endless. Vikings were a specific group of Norsemen who believed in Odin, their god and father of all gods. In the depths of winter, when shadows grew long and the winds howled like wolves, the Vikings waited, not for battle or glory, but for the 12 nights of Yule. When the veil between worlds grew thin. During these dark nights, they whispered tales of Odin, the one-eyed All-Father, who rode through the storm-black skies on his wild hunt. Children of these fierce Norse warriors crept to their hearths as darkness fell, placing their shoes beside the dying embers. Into these shoes they dropped sweet sugar for the All-Father and fresh hay for his otherworldly steed, a monster of a horse with 8 legs, born of Loki's trickery. The offerings weren't merely gifts, they were protection, a way to curry favor with a god who could be as cruel as he was wise. As little ones slept, even the most hardened Vikings would cast nervous glances at the chimneys, for they knew on these nights the sound of hooves on their roofs might not be mere imagination, and the shadows moving across their walls might belong to the wanderer himself. For 12 nights, as Yule unfolds its cold embrace, Odin leads his damned procession across the storm-swept Nordic skies. Traditionally called the Wild Hunt, it's a ghostly parade of the dead. A writhing mass of spirits and souls trailing behind the All-Father. Like a cloak of mist and shadow, the Vikings knew these nights well. Each day they would feast and drink deep from their horns, not just in celebration, but perhaps to steel themselves against what the night would bring. Their great halls would buzz with the warmth of mead and tales, yet beneath the laughter lay an edge of unease. From the day after the winter solstice, when the world hangs in perfect darkness, the 12 days of Yule march forward like spectral footsteps in the snow. Each feast, raised cup, and roaring fire serves a dual purpose: to celebrate life's persistence in the dark months, and to ward off the attention of those who ride with Odin in his nightly parade. Odin's Wild Hunt was more than mere spectacle. It was a brutal demonstration of raw, primordial power. The All-Father, ruler of the underworld and master of 9 realms, would tear through the fabric of reality itself, leading his phantom host through dimensions mortals could scarcely comprehend. No realm was beyond his reach, from the icy wastes to the burning plains, from the root depths of the golden halls of Asgard. Vikings believed viewing this ghostly parade to be a bad omen. Deep in the frozen Norse winters, the 12 days of Yule were marked by rituals that danced between celebration and superstition, between honoring the gods and warding off the darkness. An evergreen tree, defiant against winter's death, was decorated and surrounded with offerings. Carved figures of the gods were placed beneath its branches, while precious food and clothing hung like prayers, frozen in time. Each item a whispered plea to the powers that ruled their world. As darkness claimed each night, the Yule log's flames would paint shadows on the walls. Its ancient oak or ash wood cracking with forest secrets. But this was no ordinary fire. Its remnants held power long after the flames died. The charred remains would be dragged with purpose beneath sleeping beds. A smoldering ward against evil, a blackened talisman of protection. Yet another spirit stalked these sacred nights. The Ule Goat, an invisible presence that echoed Thor's mighty goats, which pulled the thunder god's chariot through the storm-racked skies. This phantom goat prowled between worlds, unseen, but felt in every cold draft and unexplained creak of timber. The Vikings left honorings for this spectral visitor, knowing it walked in the hoofprints of Thor's divine beasts. Beneath the light of the winter stars, these traditions wove together like threads in a tapestry of belief. Each ritual, each decorated branch, and each preserved log served as anchor points against the chaos of the dark season. While Odin's procession of the dead howled across 9 realms and Thor's thunder echoed in the distance, the Vikings held their ground with these sacred rites. During Yule, when frost etched shapes on window panes and darkness pressed close like a living thing, the Vikings believed the barrier between life and death was as thin as morning mist. In these 12 sacred days and nights, they didn't merely acknowledge this truth, they embraced it, calling out to the ancient spirits that dwelled in the depths of the forest. Their voices would rise in the bitter night air, songs and incantations weaving through the branches like smoke, seeking blessings from the entities older than the gods themselves. Neither living nor dead, these forest spirits held spring's promise locked within their ethereal forms. The Vikings' calls echoed through the woods, not prayers, but negotiations with powers that could turn seeds into bread and buds into fruit. Each whispered plea was a bargain struck in the space between worlds, a promise exchanged in the gathering dark. Remember us when the ice melts, bless our fields when the world turns green again. But perhaps most spectacular of all was the ritual of the burning wheel, a ceremony that married fire and faith in a desperate bid to call back the sun from its wintertime death. They would craft a massive wreath and set it ablaze. Then, in a moment of collective breath, this giant burning wreath would be released down a hillside, a wheel of fire cutting through the winter's gloom. As sparks trailed behind the fallen stars, each revolution of the burning wreath was a command to the sun itself to return. The Vikings watched the burning wreath cascade down the slopes, its flames reflecting in their eyes. Each roll, each spark, each dying ember carried their wishes skyward. Not gentle hopes, but demands carved in the fire and the wreath. In these moments, as fire and darkness danced together, even the spirits of the forest would pause. Swearing oaths was a solid tradition during the sacred days of Yule. It was similar to making a New Year's resolution. However, if the oath was sworn during Yule, it was considered highly sacred. Blood-bound oaths echo through time while spectral armies march across winter skies. These aren't mere folklore, but the dark roots from which our current cheerful Christmas traditions grew. What we now celebrate with tinsel and lights began in the depths of midwinter darkness, when Vikings gathered around fires and spoke of things that stirred in the longest night of the year. And so, dear listeners, as the wild hunt rides through the dark nights and the Yule log burns down to ethereal embers, we are reminded that we are not so different from the Norse culture. They too sat in darkness telling stories of gods and monsters, watching shadows dance on their wooden walls, and wondering what lurked in the endless nights beyond their doors. Perhaps tonight, as you walk beneath the winter stars, you'll hear that distant echo of ancient drums, or catch the scent of pine and sacrifice in the wind. Maybe you'll feel that primordial pull to light a candle in your window, not just to welcome the sun's return, but to ward off whatever walks in the dark of the night. Until next time, keep your fires burning, your doors warded, and remember, in these dark days between years, the veil between worlds grows thin, and the old gods, they're still listening.